Charles, we've got something of an historic presidential delegation traveling to China. I guess they're in China as we speak. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. I'm in the same time zone, I believe, as China. So it's it's early here and raining.
So
But
Trump, I don't know if anybody's ever done this before. I'm sure you would know if they have, but he's got this whole delegation of like all the biggest business leaders, Elon Musk and Jensen Wang. What do you expect his purpose of going there is? Making deals, obviously.
well, actually, this is standard for these types of presidential visits, going back even before Clinton. I believe Clinton's final trip to China involved a delegation of 1,500 people, multiple planes, etc. So this is not that unusual. But what is unusual is the contrast between the present state of the US economy and the present state of the Chinese economy. Now, statistics on the Chinese economy are notoriously unreliable, but even these unreliable statistics that I saw recently suggest that China's ratio of debt to output is 300%, meaning that it's highly over leveraged if you believe their numbers. And I suspect their numbers are far worse than the official statistics. So that's that statistic of debt to output is a statistic you can use really for countries, for companies, for individuals, et cetera. It's an interesting statistic. And if you get below that level in China, if you're considering investing in China as a foreign person, you basically have no rights. You can put your money in, but it's highly questionable whether you get your capital and your profits and dividends back out.
It's a roach
So
motel of cash.
right, and so large companies do it under a theory that there are 1.4 billion Chinese people, and eventually they may change, and it's a small price to pay to get into the market. Now there are all sorts of rationales. So you do this with other people's money, but if it's your own money, you're a fool to put money into China. Whereas in the United States, um, in the main, you can put as much money as you want into our economy, and you can get it out. So that's and our market today is vastly larger in every respect than the Chinese market. So why would you, if you see investment opportunities in the U.S., you would definitely do them first before you think about doing anything in China. So here, Trump arrives with a slew of people who either work for world-beating companies that were created decades ago or have created world-beating companies from scratch using an American platform as a base. So people who understand economics and finance, and that would be not the people who write about it in legacy media, and people who aren't in thrall to the Chinese because they've already been paid off one way or another, will look at this and say, my goodness, I mean, the U.S. economy, hobbled as it is by the Newsoms and the rogue judges and the blue state mayors and governors and the woke right, the U.S. economy today is stands in a different universe than the Chinese economy, and we'll see how successful this trip goes. I mean, the Chinese, right, they have lost because of what we've done in Venezuela and Iran. They have lost access to off-market price oil that Venezuela and Iran would sell below market price because they desperately needed cash. The Chinese don't have that anymore. And the Chinese have some supplies of oil and gas, but nowhere near what they would need to build out their economic dreams. We, on the other hand, are a superpower in oil and gas, and for that matter, nuclear energy and other forms of energy. So um, there, I think that, well, and a further point I think is that when you look at the number of Americans and principally Americans who have some Chinese ancestry, that is, they left China or their ancestors left China either after 1949 or well before that. These people of Chinese origin are Americans today. and they're unbelievably successful. So a lot of great talent left China a long time ago. The talent inside China is hostage to the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Liberation Army, and the maze of regulations and laws that I think is keeping the Chinese people resident inside China from building out their dreams. So you're going to see, and you've seen it on X. I was checking for this broadcast. I noticed many of these comments. There are people arguing that Trump was humiliated because Xi didn't show up at the airport. All these, I would guess, paid shills for China are trying to say that this is America looks weak. Trump is weak because he's been to China twice and Xi hasn't been to the United States. I don't think he's weak at all. And this is going to be a binary outcome trip. Either it's a triumph or it's a disaster. And we'll just have to wait and see in the next, as my day plays out, your evening progresses, we'll have to wait and see.
That is rude, though, right? Why didn't she go to the airport to meet him?
Who knows? Maybe for domestic political reasons, he wanted to project that kind of strength. But people know that I've been on Gordon Chang's broadcast since 2009 with John Batchelor, talking about these issues. And Gordon is the world's expert on China, non-Chinese world expert on China. And he's been arguing for his entire adult life as a pundit that the Chinese model under communism is doomed. And he's right. You can make it look all right if you're prepared to silence dissent one way or another and purge your opponents. You can make it look like it's working, as they are doing. And there's no question that the Chinese don't have environmental activists gluing themselves to pictures in museums and impeding infrastructure projects, nor do they have any problem when they want to put a high-speed rail system in. They just, or they already control the land. They just do it. We can't do. Look at California. I mean, California has been a progressive experiment for a long time, and they've spent, I think, over $100 billion, and they have no miles of high-speed rail for all that spending. Why is that the case? Because in America, if you want to build something, a long project, you've got to first of all deal with the private landowners, and then beyond that, you've got multiple regulators in every city, in every village, in every municipality, in the state, the federal regulators, et cetera. And the Chinese don't have to deal with any of that. I don't think we want to move to the Chinese system.
Charles, I just was looking up Gordon Chang when you mentioned him, and he was saying that Chinese EVs are coming into the United States through Canada. Canada loves to do things with China, like let Ortel be hacked and steal all their best technology. But I'm reminded that just the other day, popped up on YouTube, I'm not finding it right now, but here's another video talking about exactly the same thing. There are these robot dogs that you can buy. It's like a consumer product. It's only $3,000 or $4,000. And this guy's video says these robot dogs are a cybersecurity nightmare. The guy I saw the other day actually had one, and he was like hacking into it using, terminal or something, just through Bluetooth and his Wi-Fi router. And what that guy said was that there is literally it's a spy machine, and it was set up in such a way that when you try to figure out where the data is going, it hides all these, Chinese servers that it's going to. And so this other guy that I saw issued his own kind of firmware update to the Chinese dog to prevent it, because it's got cameras all over it, and people are using these security companies and stuff, having them walk around neighborhoods, and then somebody talks through the dog and says hey, get out of here. But these are just total Chinese spy machines that are mapping things and spying and listening and all kinds of stuff.
Then, of course, we probably have the same thing. in some
Wow.
of our products as well. But
This guy's talking about it here too. The firmware, it's sending information to China.
right, right. We have not done. I mean, it is so easy when the Chinese look at bribing. I mean, look at this guy Lieber, the
Yeah.
chair of the Harvard chemistry department. I mean, he was a tenured professor and chairman of an important department at Harvard. Turns out he was a spy. Somehow he is in China now. How he got out of how he managed to evade detection all these many years, and how many Chinese spies were in our various universities for how long? It's just shocking the degree to which the Chinese have been able to successfully infiltrate the United States. I mean, look at this mayor in California, some small town in California.
Yeah.
Turns out she's a Chinese spy. How many other spies are like that? And how many? Look at Fang and Swalwell, right?
What happened to Swalwell? They yelled about it for like a few days, and now that's it. He's gone.
Well, no, his billionaire backer just got arrested.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And he looked like a nasty piece of work, the billionaire backer.
What did they?
So I don't know what it was, but so staying though on the point of the Chinese-American trade talks, and this is a very big deal, and I think it's big. What we decide to do with China on this trip, and the repercussions are going to be huge, both for the EU, beyond the U.S. and China, but for the EU, what remains the EU, and for Mexico and China and Canada. This Mark Carney, I call him Art Carney, he's a moron, right? There's talk that we're going to withdraw from this latest trade deal, USMC, USMC deal, I guess it is, because Canada is not playing fair and Mexico is not playing fair, and we're going to throw our weight around here, as we should. I mean, when you look at the buying power, even as though the American consumer faces difficulties, the buying power of the American consumer is massive. It is obviously, it must be cheaper to produce goods for the American market inside the United States than far away. It must be cheaper, particularly now with higher energy and shipping costs and the risk associated with transport. So the U.S. is, I mean, if you take Tesla as one example, and SpaceX, the U.S. is producing groundbreaking products and services. There's massive private investment coming into our country from multiple ways, and including from massive investment from Americans inside our country. There are many great projects that I think can be proven out inside the United States of America. And our stock market, by the way, is booming. Which in the Chinese stock market, when you try to buy shares as an American in China, you're not buying the same thing as you would get in an American company. You're buying a notional interest in the underlying Chinese equity, but you're not getting the right to vote. You're not getting, all kinds. You're not actually getting shares in the underlying company. You're getting a finely crafted legal document where investment bankers, with both hands, their fingers crossed behind their backs, are saying, "Yeah, this is tantamount to equity." It's not.
Did you see Trump tweeted out that Tim Apple is joining? It's pretty funny that he calls him Tim Apple.
Yeah,
but he's leaving Apple, so he won't be Tim Apple anymore.
Yeah, there's no core left there. Yeah, but it's take for example Steve Schwartzman at Blackstone Group. Blackstone didn't exist, I believe, before 1985 or thereabouts. Lehman Brothers I guess it was sold to Shearson, and the former chairman and Steve Schwartzman got together and created this boutique. I remember when it happened because we had a bunch of Lehman partners who came into Dillon Reed, And I was one of the first people to visit Blackstone in its infancy, before it had an actual long-term lease. It was using, rent a office space near Grand Central Station, and walked in, and it was like the phones were ringing, but there weren't that many employees. And I was sitting there with Schwartzman and Pete Peterson and this Dylan Reed guy, ex of Lehman, and we were trying to figure out how to do this multi-billion-dollar deal. And they almost didn't even have calculators. Forget about computers in 1985. Today, the Blackstone Group is one of the world's most profitable companies. And it's, if not the largest, one of the largest private equity and hedge fund alternative investment firms in the world. And Peterson has passed away, but Schwartzman is, a mega billionaire.
I
That's the
forgot
kind of
your
thing.
story about Peter G. Peterson, where he was like super hairy in a hot tub or something like that. But, Hawkins implicated this guy in a murder, and he had pretty convincing evidence.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but he was Commerce Secretary, I think, under Nixon, and he was from Omaha, Nebraska. I think a Greek American, and together, I can't speak to the murder charge. I just don't know the details. But as far as business is concerned, the two of them, are proof positive that the American experiment does work, and further corroboration that AOC is dumber than a pile of rocks, because and she said billionaires don't exist. Okay, please explain the many people who are on this trip to China from America, most of whom are billionaires. And just dwelling a bit on this for a second, how Peterson Schwartzman through Blackstone made a lot of money is providing investment alternatives so that unionized public sector workers, teachers, firefighters, policemen, and the like, who, unlike most workers in the private sector, have pensions. In order to give those pensions out in retirement, you've got to find long-term investments. That's what Blackstone provides. They provide attractive long-term investments so that folks like the idiot AOC and other public sector workers can have pensions in retirement that private sector workers deserve but don't have. To say that there are no billionaires, this person, AOC, remember, she's the one who made these ridiculous comments at the Munich Security Conference, demonstrating that she probably never went to class to get her international relations degree from whatever university she went to, or attended, I should say. She's demonstrated she knows jack shit about international politics, and is now confirming that she knows even less about economics and finance. So why would anybody waste time, attention, and money on the proposition that AOC is potentially a front-running Democratic candidate for president in 2028?
That's one of the most absurd things to come along in a long time. But I mean, again, they love to just prop up whoever they prop up. I mean, they tried to make Kamala Harris president. So, I mean, here's a fair question. Who's stupider, Kamala Harris or AOC? That's a hard question.
Well, is Pee Wee Herman still alive, or did he die?
Died.
Okay, he'd be a stronger candidate than
He
AOC.
would.
Dead.
Yeah. Better candidate dead. But Spencer Pratt is gaining a lot of momentum in California, running for mayor over there. He seems like a strong candidate. I mean, that's the thing. When there's somebody like him who's like got a clear message and a purpose and seems to understand what he's talking about, they're like, oh, can't have this guy. We need somebody really stupid.
Yeah, and California is a textbook example of how big government and progressive policies don't work. As bad as the situation is in New York City, I believe the situation is even worse in California, because they've been at it longer, and it's a larger population. And I think it's a place where certain cities in California pay lifeguards who can only work for less than half the year, or call it half the year, $400,000 to be a lifeguard. I mean, there's a case in point where you should be training high school and college students to be lifeguards. You shouldn't have 65-year-old or 55-year-old person making $400,000 being a lifeguard for the summer. It's an important job, but many physically fit people in high school and college could perform that work. And they'd be very happy making $20,000 for the summer or whatever the number is.
Look at this. I didn't realize Javier Becerra was running for mayor. That's the first time seeing that.
Well, he's a despicable human being.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the one who didn't he hire the Awan brothers?
Yes.
And as Attorney General in California, he has failed to prosecute many charity frauds that he should prosecute. It's just this is Team Obama saying, we got to get more corrupt fools in big positions of power. So let's put this Becerra guy in there.
Yeah, and you had sent me a story on X earlier about two twins or something
right.
who were doing something in IT that sounded very Awanish.
Well, no, it's ridiculous. It's a Zero Hedge story, and again, I haven't confirmed it, but I'm inclined to believe it's true. Two brothers were convicted felons, right? But they somehow managed, for hacking. More than 7 years ago, they did their time. So they work for a private contractor, and they don't disclose their prison sentences. And then they get caught and they get fired. So after they get fired, they deleted numerous databases, including, if this story is true, a Homeland Security database. I mean, this is, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's one thing to say, in the AOC, I know she's not taking meth and fentanyl, but she may as well be.
Wasn't she doing ketamine, or what was that whole thing with the $19,000?
Yeah, maybe ketamine. All right, maybe whatever she's taking. In her deluded world, any public sector activity is sainted, right? I mean, it's a public sector worker who is, sacrificing time away from their loved ones and family and friends, and they're doing God's work or noble work or whatever you want to call it, Beelzebub's work. How do you have, in the first place, why is our government using private contractors to manage these databases? What's that all about? I mean, we're so concerned about security. I mean, we should have either the government knows what it's doing or it doesn't. And I think in this case, it's clear that it doesn't. Now, a friend of mine who passed away a number of years ago explained to me that in the world of IT, the government is so far behind the curve. Its employees are so stupid and they're incapable of understanding the modern IT world. And they're so overpaid that what they do is they hire all these private contractors and construct terms of service where the contractors are making vast amounts of money. And in return for structuring contracts this way, the government bureaucrats, when they can collect the pension they don't deserve, leave the government, then go work for the private contractor. It strikes me that that's an area which Doge, and if not Doge, something like Doge, needs to focus upon in the remaining time that Trump will be in power. I mean, this story, if it's true, if this story is true, massive numbers of people need to be fired and put in prison.
Charles, anytime I hear a story about some Homeland Security database getting hacked, my first suspicion is that they wanted it deleted. Like, now when somebody gets indicted for something or other and they get some discovery request, they'll say, oh, we'd love to give you all that evidence, but it got deleted by these two hackers. So we just can't produce the documents that you're asking for. Sorry, dude.
Yeah.
But Charles, we've got to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum here. I want to thank everybody who's following me on X at JG_CSTT. When you subscribe there, you get access to the sponsor exclusive content, also on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. There's been a lot of news around now, Charles, about people getting less payouts on X and reduced views. Even Mr. Beast, who I think is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, YouTube channels, talking about 50% less views on YouTube. And there have been far fewer views on YouTube. So I hope that people will sponsor the show. I don't have any corporate sponsors. It's viewer sponsorship. So please join us. We'll be back in